After my husband ran away on our wedding day, I took all the family assets and lived a wonderful life on my own. My fiancé had an agreement with his ex-girlfriend. If either of them got married to someone other than each other in the future, they would go and disrupt the wedding and the other person would definitely leave with them. When I brought this up, my fiancé just smiled and said it was just a joke. But on our wedding day, his ex-girlfriend really came to disrupt the wedding. Watching his ex-girlfriend leave with a determined look on her face, my fiancé was completely flustered. Looking at me with a troubled expression, he said, "Claire, I'm sorry. I can't break my promise. I promised her." He still chose to leave me behind, along with all the guests, and follow his ex-girlfriend. Fine, fine, fine. I've lost my husband. So it's not too much for me to take away all the property, right? Today was supposed to be my wedding day, and the lights in the hall were shining brightly. However, apart from my parents, there were only a few hotel staff members around. It wasn't that no one came to offer congratulations, they all left. Because my groom had run away. With his ex-girlfriend. I knew that he and that ex-girlfriend, Ivy, had an agreement. No matter which one of them got married, if the person they were marrying wasn't each other, they would disrupt the wedding and the other would surely leave with them. I asked him about it, and he just shook his head, smiled, and said it was just a joke. And I also thought it was a joke. After all, they had a past together. When people are deeply in love, it's inevitable that they'll make all kinds of vows. But when Ivy stood in front of him and asked him to go with her, he really went with her. He did hesitate and struggle. If he had just left with Ivy directly, I might have felt a bit better. But he had to think it over carefully before leaving. We're all adults. Both of our families are well known in Beijing. He knew how much pressure and gossip I would have to face after he ran away from the wedding, but he still left with her. After weighing the pros and cons, he still thought that Ivy was the most important. When he made up his mind, he looked at me apologetically and said, "Claire, I'm sorry. I can't break my promise. I promised her." He looked apologetic, but that didn't stop him from abandoning me and making me endure those mocking and pitying looks, as well as all the pressure that I shouldn't have had to bear. I stopped him and asked, "Are you really going to do this?" He pushed my arm away and said to me, "I'm sorry." The backs of Ryan and Ivy as they left were resolute and yet somehow cheerful. I watched them but didn't chase after them. "Ryan, I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it at all." My parents were really angry, but they still comforted me. My father even threatened to go to Ryan's family to demand an explanation. I stopped him. I was still looking in the direction of the hall entrance, the direction where they had just left. I said softly, "Dad, let's handle the affairs of us youngsters by ourselves." It was I who insisted on marrying Ryan, so I shouldn't let my parents bear the consequences for me. There was a look of heartache in my father's eyes. "Claire, no matter what decision you make, Dad will support you. It's true that our marriage was a business alliance, but you are definitely not a bargaining chip in the business world." As my father said, Ryan and I had a business alliance marriage. We got to know each other through the introduction of our parents. The day I met Ryan, I was surprised. Because it wasn't the first time I had seen him. The first time I saw him was in high school. My father said that I was old enough and asked my brother to take me out to see the world. My brother was busy with social engagements and didn't have time to take care of me. I sat alone in a corner, drinking fruit juice. That banquet wasn't very high-end. There were big shots from all walks of life, and of course, there were also some minor celebrities and small online influencers. I was unlucky enough to be targeted by two small online influencers. They seemed a bit drunk and were using vulgar language as they sat beside me. With one on each side of me, I couldn't move. Just when they were about to lay their hands on me, Ryan showed up. He drove them away and tidied up my messy bangs for me. He smiled at me and said gently, "It's okay now." I'll never forget the way he looked at me at that time. After that, he handed me over to my brother and left. At that time, I didn't know who he was, but I kept his image in my heart for year after year. On the day of our blind date, I felt really lucky. A business alliance marriage was the fate that children from families like ours couldn't escape. But fortunately, the person I was arranged to marry was the one in my heart. The blind date that day was very pleasant. He was mature in conversation and gentle in his actions, and I liked him a lot. We got together just 3 days after we met. He casually took a photo of me and posted it on Instagram to announce our relationship. I teased him, asking if he had some very important friends abroad. That's why he posted on Instagram instead of on WeChat moments. He smiled and gave a low It wasn't until 3 months after we got together, when I was chatting with my girlfriends at a tea party and talking about my boyfriend, Ryan. My girlfriends were a bit surprised. "Ryan? Doesn't he have a girlfriend?" I hadn't realized it at that time and said, "Yes, we got together 3 months ago." She said seriously, "It's not you. It's Ivy." That was the first time I heard the name Ivy. I also heard the story of Ryan and Ivy from them. It was just like the story of a prince and Cinderella. Ivy's family background could only be described as ordinary. Ryan was also opposed by his family when he was with her, but he withstood the pressure and used his own resources to pave the way for Ivy. Ivy used Ryan's social circle and resources to successfully start a company and squeezed into the upper-class circle. Her company was gradually getting better. Even if she couldn't compare with Ryan, she was quite capable. Ryan's family gradually softened their stance. The two of them also reached the stage of talking about marriage. But somehow, Ivy was sent abroad by Ryan. Whether they still had contact or not, others didn't know. Later, I also knew that he posted on Instagram just to show it to Ivy. I became a part of the game between the two of them. When I heard all this from my girlfriends, my first reaction wasn't to feel devastated but to feel ashamed. I felt really embarrassed that my boyfriend would do such a thing for a girl. After that day, I went back home and didn't go to find Ryan. When I calmed down, I still felt a bit sad. After all, I had truly liked him, and before I knew it, my eyes turned red. My father noticed the change in my mood and asked me what was wrong. I hesitated for a while and then told him about Ryan and Ivy. He's my father. My relationship with Ryan wasn't just a matter between the two of us, it was also a matter between two families. He had the right to know and the right to interfere. My father thought for a while and didn't make a hasty decision. He said in a deep voice, "Let Ryan's family come and make things clear face to face." That night, our two families got together. Ryan's uncle vowed that they had never softened their stance on the matter of Ryan and Ivy. "The only daughter-in-law I recognize is Claire," Ryan's uncle said. He was talking about me, but the person he was looking at wasn't me. It was my father. What he valued wasn't the daughter-in-law but the fact that my surname was Claire. That Claire, who could give his family great help. Ryan also admitted that he and Ivy had a past. But he also emphasized, "We've broken up, and she's gone abroad. There won't be any intersection between us in the future." He admitted it frankly, and my father couldn't say much. Everyone has a past, and this isn't really his fault. After Ryan's family left, my father and I talked for a while. He still thought that Ryan wasn't worthy of my trust. Dad is also a man, and I know what men think. If he can use his own resources to help a girl grow, then he must love her deeply. To put it bluntly, Dad is afraid that maybe one day in the future, he'll abandon you for that Ivy. I remained silent and tears fell down one by one. My father felt sorry for me and comforted me, saying, "But if you want to be with him, it's okay. Dad will always be your backer. As long as Dad is here, he won't dare to abandon you." That day, I cried in my father's arms for a long time but still couldn't bring myself to break up with Ryan. Because I knew that the relationship between Ryan and me wasn't pure in the first place. I couldn't be selfish and only consider my own feelings. I also had to think about the interests of our two families. I didn't expect all of his true feelings. I just hoped that he could maintain the image of a good boyfriend and a good husband in front of others. Even though he still had lingering feelings for Ivy during the 3 years we were together, it didn't matter. Miraculously, we managed to stay together for 3 years until we reached the stage of talking about marriage. During these 3 years, he took meticulous care of me and was extremely considerate. He also helped our family a lot. He did what a boyfriend should do, so well that I could overlook the messy business between him and Ivy. In our circle, most couples are just putting on a show. I was already satisfied that I could maintain such a decent relationship with Ryan. But I still underestimated Ivy, underestimated the feelings between them, and even more underestimated their shamelessness. They even dared to disrupt the wedding and run away. Did they think they were acting in an idle drama? Adults should always pay the price for what they've done. The incident of Ryan running away from the wedding caused a big stir in the local area. Even the newspaper dedicated a page to report it. Ryan's family never showed up, and my family was dealing with this mess. I didn't let my parents handle it either. I took on all these rumors and pressure by myself. I didn't take the initiative to contact Ryan these days, and he didn't get in touch with me either. After dealing with the mess, I went back to our home, the home that belonged to Ryan and me. I like the minimalist style, while Ryan likes the Scandinavian style. Everything in the house was set up according to the style I liked. He said that as long as I was happy, that was all that mattered. I jokingly asked him, "Then, facing a house full of furniture you don't like, will you get annoyed and not want to come home?" He smiled and scolded me for being silly, with an affectionate look in his eyes. "What you like, I like. As long as you're at home, I like it." If this hadn't happened, I really would have thought that Ryan was a perfect lover. Whether it was emotional value or material value, he had given them to me. The diamond ring he used to propose to me was specially bought at an auction in Macau, worth over 50 million yuan. He said that he wanted to give me the best. It's not that he didn't love me, it's just that he loved Ivy more. They say that in love, there's no such thing as first come, first served. But for Ryan, it seemed that he had always followed this principle. I could never compare to Ivy. Anyway, it didn't matter. I was no longer a little girl who only knew about falling in love. There was a noise at the entrance hall, and I snapped out of my memories. Looking up, I saw Ryan, and Ivy behind him. This was the first time I took a close look at Ivy. She was wearing an exquisite and simple dress, with light makeup on her face. When she smiled, there were two sweet dimples on her face. She looked so cute and sweet. She was completely different from me in style. They opened the door with smiles on their faces, but when they saw me, their expressions changed. Ryan took a step forward, blocked in front of Ivy, and looked at me warily. "What are you doing here?" Although I was already disappointed enough in him, seeing him protecting Ivy like this and being on guard against me, I still felt very uncomfortable. It was like concrete had been poured into my chest. It was stuffy, heavy, and hard to breathe. But I didn't show any sign of discomfort. With a smile on my face, I looked at Ryan and said, "Do I need a reason to come back to my own home? This house was bought by my father and given to us as our wedding house. Of course, Ryan's family also bought us a house, a villa in the suburbs. The one my father bought for us was in the city center, which was convenient for us to commute to work." Ryan was startled. Probably realizing that his reaction was a bit too extreme, he put on a smile. "That's not what I meant, honey." The last word stopped abruptly. He guiltily turned to look at Ivy. She looked sad. Ryan didn't know what to do. I quietly watched him at a loss and didn't forget to add fuel to the fire. "Who is this lady?" I asked, drawing out the last syllable. He didn't answer. Of course, he didn't dare to answer. I smiled. "I have something to talk about with my husband. Does this lady want to keep listening?" Ivy blushed, looking both ashamed and angry. Ryan looked at me, turned around, and said softly to Ivy, "You go back first." Ivy looked a bit aggrieved. But Ryan still insisted that she leave. He closed the door, walked to the opposite side of me, and sat down. He spoke first, with an apologetic tone. "I'm sorry, honey. What I did by running away from the wedding was really too much." He only remembered to apologize at this late hour. I found it really boring. The incident of running away from the wedding had already happened, and I had already controlled the subsequent public opinion. There was no use dwelling on this matter anymore, and I didn't want to waste any more time, so I changed the topic. I said, "What? You brought her to our home so blatantly? You really don't take me, your wife, seriously at all." "Yes, Ryan and I got our marriage certificate half a year ago. Our two companies were too busy, and we hadn't had time to hold the wedding. Finally, when we had some free time, we held a make-up wedding." Ryan remained silent. I still had a smile on my face. "Even if you don't take me seriously, you should at least give my Claire family some face. If you really make us angry, we'll definitely get divorced. If you have an affair during our marriage, you'll be the one at a disadvantage." I advised him nicely, looking at Ryan with a smile. "No." Ryan quickly denied it. "We won't get divorced." "Oh? So you mean you want to enjoy the benefits that marriage brings you, the help from the Claire family, and also be sweet with your little lover?" I understood what he meant and directly exposed his thoughts. He pursed his lips and didn't admit it. But I knew that was exactly what he meant. Seeing that he didn't say anything, I continued, "Actually, it's okay." He looked up at me, looking extremely surprised. "Honey? Are you serious?" I raised my hand to stop him from speaking. "Don't call me honey anymore. It's a bit disgusting. You can just call me that in front of others in the future. In private, you can call me Miss Claire or President Claire." He frowned and looked at me without saying a word. I took out an agreement from my bag. "If you want to live like this, go ahead. Sign this agreement." It was a marriage in name only agreement. It stated that during our marriage, Ryan and I could each do our own thing, but under no circumstances would we allow the other's third party to disrupt our marriage. If that happened, the person involved would give up all the marital property. Ryan was reading the content of the agreement while I lit a cigarette and smoked. After reading the content of the agreement, he signed it readily. I couldn't help but feel sorry for Ivy. Look, Ryan didn't have any intention of marrying her at all. Once I got the agreement, I stood up and prepared to leave. Ryan stopped me. "Aren't you staying?" I walked up to him with a smile, grabbed his tie, and blew the cigarette smoke in his face. I smiled charmingly, looked at him, and said, "Don't be so disgusting, Mr. Ryan." Then I let go of his tie and turned to leave. After walking out of the house, I called my girlfriend Lily. "Do you want to go for a beauty treatment some other day?" "It's on me." I made an appointment with Lily to go for a beauty treatment today. "The incident between your husband and Ivy has caused such a stir, and you still have the mood to come out for a beauty treatment," Lily said as she stretched. I was driving, looking straight ahead, and said indifferently, "What does that have to do with me?" "Are you going to divorce him?" Lily sat up. "Then I have to persuade you. It's easy for you two to get married, but getting divorced will be really troublesome. I've checked. There are quite a lot of cooperation projects between your two companies." Lily chattered on. I knew she meant well, so I didn't interrupt her. I just waited until she finished speaking and then said, "No, we won't. It's just that we have a marriage in name only now, and I'm too lazy to worry about him." Lily let out a long oh and finally concluded, well, that's okay too. I smiled and stopped the car. Get out. We're here. Lily looked at the beauty salon in front of her and frowned. Which one is this? Why have I never heard of it? Don't mess up my face. I curled my lips into a smile. Having a facial treatment is secondary. The important thing is to watch the show. She was a bit puzzled but didn't ask further. She just raised her eyebrows, looking like she was ready to enjoy the show. We pushed the door open and went in and saw Ivy at a glance. Ivy is in the beauty industry. It's the easiest career to get into. Back then, Ryan had to swallow his pride and begged many wealthy ladies and young misses to get membership cards here. That year, Ivy's beauty salon had a pretty high income and was even featured in a business magazine. Unfortunately, the favor cards could only be used once. In the second year, no one came to her salon anymore. Now it's barely breaking even. When Lily saw Ivy, she immediately grabbed my arm and whispered in my ear, "This is Ivy." I didn't change my expression. Lily also understood that the show I wanted her to watch was this. Ivy wanted to hide when she saw me. But I stopped her. What? Aren't you going to receive your customers? Ivy stood still with an ugly smile on her face. Seeing this, a clerk nearby smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Miss, our store manager doesn't receive customers." I turned to look at that clerk and smiled. "I'm married. Please call me Mrs. Ryan." After I said that, I saw from the corner of my eye that Ivy's face turned a bit pale. How can there be a rule that the store manager doesn't receive customers? Your store isn't big, but there are quite a lot of rules, Lily snorted. The clerk was left speechless after being criticized. I sat on the sofa nearby and said, "I just want your store manager to serve me. What should I do? How much do I need to deposit?" The clerk didn't say anything and carefully watched Ivy's expression. At this time, Ivy had composed herself. She smiled, but there was a bit of provocation in her eyes. 1,000,000 yuan, Miss Claire. Go ahead and deposit it. She still insisted on calling me Miss Claire. Lily said, "It's Mrs. Ryan." Oh, obviously, Ivy couldn't keep her composure on her face. Lily didn't forget to add another jab, "It's only 1,000,000 yuan. It's really not worth much." I took out a card from my bag and handed it to the clerk. "I'll deposit 5,000,000 yuan. Go ahead and charge it. Let alone 1,000,000 or 5,000,000 yuan. Even if it were 10,000,000 yuan, I wouldn't blink an eye. Because I was using Ryan's card. According to the agreement, Ivy had to serve me in person. I didn't do many treatments. I just simply had a facial mask and asked her to give me a massage. I was really afraid that she might deliberately mess up my face on purpose. I was deliberately humiliating her. Not only did I want to humiliate her, but I also wanted to chat with Lily as if no one else was around. What did we talk about? We talked about how Ryan agreed to have a marriage in name only with me and would never divorce me in his life, and that Ivy could only be a mistress. After coming out of Ivy's beauty salon, I was in a really good mood. I guessed that she would definitely go and make a scene with Ryan. Of course, I didn't expect that she would make Ryan divorce me just by being provoked once. And I didn't want to divorce Ryan so soon either. After all, what was written in the agreement was only the marital property. We had just been married for 3 months. All the cooperation projects were still ongoing and hadn't seen any profits yet. How much marital property could we have? What's the good of getting divorced now? You have to fatten the fish before you can catch it easily. I was sitting in the living room with my eyes closed, resting. The financial news was playing on the TV. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I got up and went to open the door. It was Ryan who came. After we signed the agreement, I changed the password of the door. Of course, even if I hadn't changed the password, he probably wouldn't have come here. He was busy being with Ivy. After all, she was his first love, the moonlight he could never forget. I stepped aside to let him in. I guessed that he came to defend Ivy, so he didn't want to lose face outside. He came into the room, poured himself a glass of water on his own, watched TV, and didn't say anything. I was a bit surprised. I thought he would question me, but I didn't expect that he could keep his composure. I didn't say anything either and just waited for him to speak first. We sat like this for half an hour without saying a word. He was probably also waiting for me to lose my patience. I was too lazy to bother with him. I turned off the TV and was about to go into the bedroom to sleep. Just as I stepped into the bedroom, Ryan followed me right in. I was startled and blocked him at the door of the room. "What are you doing?" he said matter-of-factly. "Going to bed." I was a bit confused. "If you want to sleep, go back to your own home to sleep." He looked at me a bit shamelessly. "We're married. This is my home. The marriage in name only agreement states that we can't have a sexual relationship," I frowned and said. He looked at me and suddenly smiled. "You said I was shameless, wanting both things. Aren't you the same?" I looked at him seriously. "What do you mean, President Ryan? Aren't you calling yourself Mrs. Ryan outside? What? Now you don't want to fulfill your duties as a wife?" When he said this, there was desire in his eyes as he touched my arm in a rather improper way, but I knew he wasn't really interested. He said this still because of Ivy. I smiled and pushed his hand away. What? Am I not Mrs. Ryan? If you like, you can also go out and say that you're Claire's husband. Also, it was you who said you wouldn't divorce. I proposed the marriage a name only just to go along with the situation. Besides, I took the initiative to give Ivy 5 million yuan. You should thank me. Otherwise, if you gave it to her, I could go through legal procedures to get it back. I've given her 5 million yuan. What's wrong with pissing her off a bit? You. Ryan's face looked really ugly. He opened his mouth but couldn't say anything for a while. I pushed him away hard. He staggered back a couple of steps. I leaned against the door of the bedroom and warned him, tell Ivy that if she wants to be a mistress, she should have the awareness of being a mistress. Take the money and keep her mouth shut. And you too. If you cheat, you should have the awareness of cheating. You can even do something like coming to disgust me for a mistress. I scolded him but he didn't retort. That's how it is when you're in the wrong. I didn't know what he was thinking now but I felt quite good. Whether people say I'm unruly and willful or that I'm bullying others with my power, this is what he deserves. Originally we could have become a couple who respected each other. I gave him a chance but he didn't cherish it. Yes, just as I said before, I already knew about Ivy's existence long ago. Ryan gave me his guarantee back then, saying that he had no contact with Ivy anymore. However, once the seed of doubt is planted, it's hard to pretend that nothing has happened. I had someone investigate Ivy. I knew that she was in France at that time. And Ryan went to France twice a year. Every time he said it was for a business trip, but in fact, he was going to see Ivy. I knew about it but didn't expose him. Just a year ago, I joked with him, I don't have much going on in my company recently. How about I accompany you on your business trip? Even a calm person like him suddenly panicked. No, thanks. He refused at first. When he saw my inquiring eyes, he avoided my gaze in a flustered manner. I'm going there for work, he emphasized the words, for work. I'm afraid I won't have time to accompany you. You're not familiar with the place, and it won't be fun for you to be on your own, he added, looking at me affectionately. At that time, I wasn't sure whether I still liked him or not. I just felt a sour feeling in my heart. I maintained a smile on my face and said to him, all right, then I won't go. He hugged me, when the company is not busy in the future, I'll accompany you to France for a trip. But this promise hadn't been fulfilled even after a year. Sometimes when I looked at Ryan, I wondered what true love really was. He loved me, but he married me just for the company's interests. He didn't love me, yet he could be so affectionate in front of me and give me both spiritual and material satisfaction. He loved Ivy, but he wasn't willing to give her a proper status and let her be the mistress that everyone despised. He didn't love Ivy, but he couldn't let her go after all these years and would rather cheat on me to be with her. Now I understand. He still loved Ivy, but he didn't just want pure love. He also wanted a career. And for his career, only I could help him. What he truly loved was himself. He lingered between two women, enjoying the material value I brought him and also the emotional value Ivy gave him. To be honest, I was a bit envious of Ryan. On the day when the first project that Ryan and I cooperated on was completed, we held a press conference. Ryan asked me if he needed to pick me up. I thought about it and said, never mind. I don't like showing my face in front of the cameras. I won't go. He didn't say much, just replied and then hung up the phone, and I stood in front of the wardrobe, starting to choose the dress to wear for the dinner party. I definitely would go. Not only would I go, but I also wanted to make things uncomfortable for them. 2 hours before the official start of the press conference, almost everyone had arrived. After all, it was such a great social occasion. Who could resist it? I had arrived long ago, but I didn't rush to show up. I just quietly observed every move of Ryan and Ivy in the dark. Yes, if I didn't come, he would bring Ivy with him. Back then, the affair between him and Ivy had caused a big stir. Among the people who came this time, many also recognized Ivy. I looked at the reporter opposite me and raised my glass to her. I hoped she could write a good report on this. The press conference was about to start, and I showed up. Everyone was startled when they saw me. Ivy's appearance beside Ryan was already enough for them to gossip about, but they were also used to it. In our circle, which family doesn't have some secrets? But when it really came to the surface, Ryan was the only one. They had been secretly waiting to see the joke, and my appearance pushed the atmosphere to a climax. I looked at Ryan, and tears just flowed down my cheeks. I didn't say anything. I just accused him with my eyes. There was obvious panic on his face. He subconsciously pushed Ivy away. He took a step forward and grabbed my hand. Honey, why are you here? I lowered my head, trying my best to control my emotions. When I raised my face again, there was a restrained and broken smile on it. To anyone, I seemed to be a woman whose husband had cheated, whose marriage was unfortunate, but who had been enduring it all along. Actually, this kind of persona was a bit pitiful, but it didn't matter. The real winner won't care about the little stigma in the process. I was afraid you'd be too busy on your own, I said. Then I put on another smile. Miss Ivy is here too. Ivy didn't understand what I meant. She opened her mouth but didn't answer my question. The reporter's cameras kept clicking, and I secretly curled the corners of my lips. Before we could say more, the countdown appeared on the big screen. Ryan seemed to have found a life-saving straw and said, "The press conference is about to start. We'll talk about other things later." I nodded, with a reluctant look in my eyes. I took the seat that should have been Ivy's. She could only go to the audience seats. Actually, that's not right. This seat was originally mine. I just made her think that it was hers. Ivy sat in the spectator seats, looking at me with eyes that seemed to be spitting fire. She thought I would be afraid, but she didn't know that when I saw her look, I just felt excited. Because I was the one in power. The press conference went fairly smoothly. After the press conference, it came to the free questioning session for the reporters. At the beginning, they asked questions properly, basically all about the newly released products. After all, they were from the Ryan family and the Claire family, and they didn't dare to easily provoke us and ask some questions they shouldn't. To be honest, I was a bit disappointed. Fortunately, I had been prepared. I gave the reporter I had raised my glass to a look. She stood up and said, "President Ryan, you already have a family. Why did you bring Miss Ivy to attend?" Ryan's face darkened, and he said coldly, "Please don't ask questions unrelated to the products." However, since someone had opened this Pandora's box, how could the other reporters sit still? Gossip and scandals were much easier to create a sensation than products. "President Ryan, I heard that you and Miss Ivy were each other's first love. Have you two still not forgotten each other? Does Miss Ivy mean to be a mistress on purpose? What's President Claire's view on this?" The reporter's questions came like a barrage of bullets. Soon, the situation became uncontrollable. Ryan looked at me, with a bit of pleading in his eyes. He wanted me to speak up and control the situation. After all, only what I said now would be somewhat credible. No matter how much he and Ivy said, it would just be the excuses of cheaters. I turned off my microphone and leaned close to Ryan's ear. "If you want me to help you, President Ryan, you should show some sincerity." He gritted his teeth. "I'll break up with Ivy." He still thought that what I wanted was him? "I want 20% of the shares of your company," I said. "What?" Ryan was shocked. "What's the matter? President Ryan, are you reluctant?" I asked. "If you don't clarify this, it will also have an impact on your company," Ryan threatened. He was right, and I nodded in recognition. "But Ryan, I'm the victim. Most of our company's business is targeted at women. Do you think the impact on me is good or bad?" Ryan took a step back. 10%. We're husband and wife. What's the difference between yours and mine? I want 20%. Since there's no difference, why are you so insistent? I looked at him with red eyes. "Because this is the guarantee I want. A guarantee for our marriage." Ryan gave in. A woman should show weakness when she should. "Anyway, as long as you can get what you want, that's fine." After getting what I wanted, I cleared my throat and said, "Dear reporter friends." The venue fell silent, and only the flashes were constantly flashing. Everyone was waiting for me to speak. The relationship between President Ryan and I is very stable, and there's no third party between us. Although President Ryan and Miss Ivy had a past, the two have already broken up and are just good friends now. Speaking of this, a tear rolled down my cheek. The corners of my mouth were already trembling, and my voice choked up, but I still insisted on finishing what I wanted to say. The so-called running away from the wedding was actually because Miss Ivy encountered some difficulties and my husband was in a hurry to help her. I hope our media friends won't make malicious speculations anymore. Whether it's us or Miss Ivy, we all have our own lives. I choked up again, we are all very happy. After saying that, I lowered my head, took a few deep breaths, and then looked up with a forced smile on my face. I hope everyone can focus on our new products. Thank you all. After saying this, I covered my mouth and left in a hurry. When I passed by that reporter, she nodded at me. I could already guess what the news would say tomorrow. It must be that I endured humiliation for love, that Ivy knowingly became a mistress, and that Ryan was unfaithful in love. However, my clarification also doomed this matter not to cause too big a stir. This matter would only be a foreshadowing. Ryan was actually not very satisfied with what I said that day. After all, although I had clarified things for them, I still managed to create an image of myself as a victim. So he was reluctant to give me the shares of his company for a long time. I had urged him about it too, but he always managed to muddle through and put me off every time. Just when I was worried about what to do, Ivy came to me on her own initiative. When she called me and told me that she was pregnant, I almost cheered out loud. I confirmed it again and asked her, "Really?" "Of course. The child is Ryan's," she said in a very proud tone. "As far as I know, Ryan hasn't even touched you yet, right?" She had an air of superiority. "Ryan will marry me sooner or later." If you're sensible, you should divorce him as soon as possible. I replied perfunctorily. Ivy was extremely angry when she saw that I didn't take her seriously at all. What's your attitude? I didn't dare to make her angry. What if she got so angry that she had a miscarriage? Without her pregnancy, I wouldn't even know what to do with Ryan. I quickly put on a nervous look. You can't give birth to this child. When I said this, she was indeed satisfied. Wasn't what she wanted exactly my panic? When is it convenient for you? Let's make an appointment and have a good talk, I said, lowering my posture. She readily agreed. After all, mistresses all want to trample on the legitimate wife and watch her lose miserably. Since she wanted to see it, I would act it out for her. We made an appointment at a restaurant. I arrived earlier than Ivy. From the corner of my eye, I saw that the reporter I knew had already arrived. Ivy was late. She didn't even show any signs of pregnancy yet, but she deliberately stuck out her belly and held her waist. I secretly rolled my eyes, but when she sat down in front of me, I had already put on a pale face. How many months? I asked in a trembling voice. She slightly raised her chin, looking very arrogant. Almost 2 months. She was afraid that I wouldn't believe her, so she even handed me the prenatal examination report. I deliberately picked it up to look at it so that the reporter could take pictures. What does Ryan think? I asked. He wants me to give birth to it. But if your child is born, it will just be an illegitimate child. For the sake of the child, it's better to have an abortion as soon as possible. I was kindly advising her, but actually I was poking at her sore spot. My child won't be an illegitimate child. He's Ryan's child. She suddenly shouted. Everyone in the restaurant looked over at her. She lowered her voice again. Ryan will marry me. She stared at me viciously. As for you, just wait for the divorce. I pretended to lower my head in despair. In fact, I secretly took a look at the reporter. She nodded at me, meaning that she had enough material and wouldn't take pictures anymore. Then I didn't bother to act anymore. Looking at Ivy, I said coldly, do you really think having a child makes you so special? Whether you want to give birth to it is your business. Whether we get divorced or not is my business. You'd better behave yourself. Otherwise, don't blame me if I make you and your child disappear together. She looked at me in disbelief, unable to figure out how I could suddenly change so much. Are you threatening me? She raised her voice. Aren't you afraid that I'll tell Ayang? Go ahead. You'd better do it right now, I said. I'm pregnant with Ayang's child. He will definitely stand by my side. I don't know whether she said this to threaten me or to comfort herself and boost her own confidence. Since I had achieved my goal, I didn't bother to argue with her anymore and turned around and left. When I passed by the reporter's table, I gently knocked on her table. She followed me out too. In the car, I gave her 200,000 yuan in cash. Don't write the news for now. Just leak the news that Ivy is pregnant. Just say that it seems she's using it to force me to divorce. She nodded. I understand. That night, I went to Ryan's house again and showed Ivy's prenatal examination report to the two elderly people. Dad, Mom, I really don't know what to think. After all, this is the blood of the Ryan family, I said with red eyes. Ryan's father blushed with shame and was even more embarrassed. I'll ask someone to take Ivy to have an abortion right away. Ryan's mother quickly stopped him. After all, it's Ryan's child. After calming Ryan's father down, she looked at me again. Claire, Mom knows you're a good girl. It's a life after all. Please be kind-hearted and let this child be born. As she said that, she put a bracelet on my hand. It was a jade bracelet of very good quality and should be quite valuable, but it was still too little. I looked at Ryan's mother with a troubled expression, but I'm worried about our marriage. As soon as I mentioned marriage, Ryan's father couldn't hold back, because he knew that our marriage represented interests. He quickly said, no matter what, Dad won't let her affect your marriage. Thank you, Dad, I said in a weak voice. The two elderly people were silent for a while. Finally, Ryan's mother said, child, how about this? You let Ivy give birth to the child. As long as the child is born, we'll send her abroad and never let her come back. You can raise this child as your own. Anyway, if you raise it by your side since childhood, it will be no different from your own child. As she said that, she put 2 more gold bracelets on my hand. Mom knows you're aggrieved. Don't worry. Mom will definitely not treat you unfairly. I nodded and sensibly agreed. That reporter edited the video of my meeting with Ivy and posted it online, but the statement was rather ambiguous. The only certain thing was that Ivy was indeed pregnant. I also hired some online water army to make everyone guess that the child was Ryan's. Not long after the video was posted online, Ryan called me. Why did you meet with Ivy? Why didn't you tell me? When did she get pregnant? It seemed that Ryan didn't know that Ivy was pregnant yet. This also showed from the side that Ryan had never thought of giving Ivy a proper status from the beginning to the end. And he had never wanted to have a child with her either. Because it would be too troublesome. Otherwise, when Ivy found out that she was pregnant, she would definitely have told Ryan immediately. She used the child to threaten me, asking me to divorce you and saying that you asked her to give birth to the child. What else could I do if I didn't go to see her? It's clearly your own fault for not being able to control yourself. I'm cleaning up the mess for you. How dare you question me? With just these 2 sentences, I left Ryan speechless. I'm sorry. I was too emotional, he apologized and then stated his purpose. Could you please clarify it for me again? My company is about to go public. I can't afford to have any problems now. I remained silent. Ryan gritted his teeth. I'll give you 20% of the shares of my company. Then wait until you sign the share transfer agreement with me, I said and then hung up the phone. I guess that Ryan must be very angry now. I contacted that reporter and asked her to release another audio clip. The sound was a bit fuzzy, but it could still be heard that it was Ivy who said, "My child won't be an illegitimate child. He's Ryan's child." However, for the name Ryan, I asked the reporter to deliberately blur it. I was putting pressure on Ryan. The next day, Ryan brought the share transfer agreement. After I confirmed that there was no problem, I signed it. By the way, I clarified online that Ivy was indeed pregnant, but the child wasn't Ryan's. She came to see me just because she didn't know many people here and wanted me to accompany her to have a prenatal examination. I emphasized, Miss Ivy and my husband are very good friends, and naturally, she's also my friend. They are already in the past. I really hope that everyone won't keep dwelling on my husband's past anymore. I showed the video to Ryan. Are you satisfied? Ryan didn't say anything and just took his coat and left. For Ivy's sake, he had lost 20% of his shares. He was really angry and holding it in now. Ryan's mother took Ivy to Ryan's house, and I also went back to Ryan's house from time to time. I used to only go back to Ryan's house during festivals, but now I had to go there often because I was worried. I wouldn't go there empty-handed either. I always brought some tonics for Ivy, and usually, I would also tell Ryan's mother to take good care of Ivy. She's a pregnant woman. When she eats, it's good for both her and the baby. I'm not saying that I don't mind. I just think the child is innocent. Moreover, it's Ryan's child. Every time I went there and said this, Ryan's mother would feel sorry for me and then give me a lot of precious jewelry. I also overheard that Ryan's father didn't agree with her doing this, but she said, "What do you know? Claire doesn't feel secure, so she keeps coming back. If I give her all the good things, she'll know that we still care about her and she'll feel at ease. If she feels at ease, the Claire family will be at ease too, and our family will have a good life. You can't really let this Ivy enter our family, can you? You see, women understand women best. I understand my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law also understands me." After this incident, the whole Ryan family felt indebted to me and compensated me more generously in terms of material things. Until Ivy gave birth, I lived a very comfortable life. Soon, it was Ivy's due date. Because she had eaten too many tonics during pregnancy, the baby was too big. Ryan's mother insisted that she must have a natural birth, and she almost died on the operating table. She managed to survive, but she never regained her former vitality. Considering that she had just given birth, Ryan's mother discussed with me and planned to send her abroad after she recovered a bit. I didn't really care. It didn't matter if she wasn't sent away, because I was going to divorce Ryan soon. I had already hired a detective and a lawyer. I had evidence of Ryan's affair, evidence of Ivy's forcing the issue, plus our previous marriage and name-only agreement. There was also the video of my meeting with Ivy before I asked that reporter to release the whole process. The whole process that I directed. In the video, I was just a pitiful legitimate wife who was forced by the mistress. Whether it was in terms of law or public opinion, I was the winner. After the divorce, I should be able to make a fortune. Ryan's mother wasn't really kind-hearted either, because she didn't even find anyone to take care of Ivy during her confinement. As a result, Ivy suffered from a lot of after effects. On the day when Ryan's family held a celebration for the baby's 1-month-old birthday, I proposed divorce to Ryan. We had been living separately all along. Even if he was determined not to divorce, the law would still make us divorce. I went to see Ivy again and told her the news that I was going to divorce Ryan. After thinking about it, I thought that someone like Ryan shouldn't be allowed to be available in the market. Ivy and he should be tied together for life. A scumbag and a cheap woman, a perfect match. Because the amount of assets involved in my divorce from Ryan was too huge, the divorce process took more than half a year. During these 6 months, I tried my best to reduce contact with Ryan's family, but I also knew that their family was in a mess. Most of his property was awarded to me, and I also took away 20% of the shares of his company. Although it didn't make his family completely collapse, it still set them back by 20 years. Ryan's mother's private savings were also almost emptied by me. Ivy didn't disappoint me. She had been pestering Ryan all the time and even didn't hesitate to ask the media to expose her underground relationship with Ryan. All this was just to force the issue and get into the family. On the day when we went to get the divorce certificate, Ryan looked at me as if his eyes were poisoned. "You're so cruel." I smiled, "Thank you for the compliment." I didn't bother with him anymore and got into the car. I took the money I got from the divorce and went out to have a good time with Lily for a while. Lily asked me if I would look for another relationship. I thought about it and said to her, we'll see. Although my relationship with Ryan was a complete failure, I wouldn't lose the ability to love someone or the right to be loved because of it. If I'm lucky enough in this life to meet someone who truly loves me and is worthy of my trust, I will be with him, marry him, have a child, and live a happy life. But I won't get married for the sake of interests or having a child anymore. If I enter the marriage hall again, it must be because of love. If I'm not lucky enough and can't meet such a person, that's okay too. I have a lot of money, and there won't be a lack of men around me. I'll just have fun with younger guys. That's also good. My future life will be good no matter what.